The Cosmic Happiness Commission declared human festivals the most joyous events known. Part 1. Commissioner of the Empire had never smiled in his life. His species didn't have the facial structure for it, but more than that, they didn't see the point. Happiness was a chemical reaction in the brain, nothing more. It could be measured and studied like any other phenomenon in the universe. That's why the Galactic Council had chosen him to lead the Cosmic Happiness Commission. After 3,000 years of expansion across the stars, the Council had finally achieved something remarkable: peace. With peace came prosperity, and with prosperity came an unexpected question. What now? The Council decided they should study joy. Not for any practical reason, but because they could. They wanted to know which species experienced the most happiness, which celebrations brought the greatest pleasure, and whether joy itself could be understood through science. Accepted the assignment with his usual efficiency. He assembled a team of researchers from 40 different species, each equipped with the most advanced scanning equipment the galaxy could produce. They had devices that could measure dopamine levels from orbit, sensors that detected emotional resonance across entire cities, and computers that could calculate the exact amount of joy in any given moment. Their first stop was VII, home to the crystalline choir. The crystal beings gathered once every 100 rotations to sing in perfect harmony, and his team set up their equipment and waited. When the singing began, it was beautiful. Mathematical precision given voice, every note calculated to produce maximum aesthetic pleasure. The scanners showed impressive results. Joy levels reached 847 on the standardized happiness scale. The researchers took careful notes and moved on. Next came the grand contemplation of the wise ones on 442b. Thousands of beings sat in absolute silence for 30 days, their minds linked in peaceful meditation. The readings were remarkable. Pure contentment radiated from the gathering like heat from a star. The scale reached 1,203, was pleased. The data was excellent. They visited the spawning grounds of the aquatic, where millions gathered to continue their species. Biology and celebration merged into one enormous event that lasted for weeks. The joy readings hit 1,456. Assistant, a young researcher named Kip from a mammalian species, seemed excited by the number, reminded her that excitement was unprofessional. For 6 months, they traveled from world to world. They documented the fire dances of the volcanic people, the memory sharing of the Hive Collective, and the gravity games of the gas giant dwellers. Each celebration was unique. Each culture had its own way of expressing joy, and each reading added more data to their comprehensive study. Then they arrived at Earth in the middle of December. The readings started going haywire before they even entered orbit. "Commissioner," Kip said, staring at her screens with confusion. "The sensors are detecting massive joy emissions from multiple locations simultaneously." "Equipment malfunction," said calmly. "Recalibrate and scan again." Kip recalibrated. The readings didn't change. In fact, they got stronger as they got closer to the planet. "Sir, I'm reading joy levels above 15,000 in at least 40 different locations. That's impossible. Our scale doesn't go that high." "Then the equipment is clearly broken," said. "We'll land and perform diagnostics." They landed in New York City on December 31st, though they didn't know the significance of the date at first. Led his team through the crowded streets, carrying portable scanners to identify the source of the malfunction. The streets were packed with humans. They were laughing, shouting, wearing strange glittering hats and throwing colored paper into the air. Music blasted from every building. The smell of cooking food filled the air. Lights sparkled on every surface. His team stood in the middle of Times Square, surrounded by millions of celebrating humans, and watched their equipment register numbers that shouldn't exist. "Commissioner," Kip whispered, "the scanners aren't malfunctioning, this is real." At midnight, the humans began counting backward from 10. When they reached 0, The noise became deafening. People kissed strangers, hugged friends, and screamed with pure joy into the winter sky. Fireworks exploded overhead. The happiness readings broke every scale the Commission had ever used. And then something strange happened. Felt something in his chest, a warmth he'd never experienced before. Around him, his team of 40 researchers from 40 different worlds were all experiencing the same thing. Some were crying. Others were laughing. A few had started dancing with the humans, though they didn't know how they'd made that decision. Kip grabbed S's arm. "Sir, we need to study this. This changes everything." Looked at the chaos around him. Humans were pulling complete strangers into embraces. They were sharing bottles of champagne with anyone nearby. They were singing songs that everyone seemed to know the words to. The joy was so thick in the air that it felt like a physical presence. "Yes," said quietly, "I believe it does." The next morning, while nursing what the humans called a hangover, held an emergency meeting with his team. They reviewed the data from the previous night. The numbers were undeniable. Human celebrations generated joy at levels that exceeded every other species in the known galaxy by a factor of 47. Perhaps it was an anomaly, suggested one researcher, a once-in-a-lifetime event. "Let's find out," said. They stayed on Earth. January brought New Year celebrations in other cultures following different calendars. February brought Valentine's Day and something called Carnival in Brazil. March had Day, where apparently everyone pretended to be Irish and drank green beer. April had Easter and Passover and countless spring festivals. Every single celebration registered numbers that shouldn't exist. Expanded the research team. He sent investigators to every continent, every culture, every human gathering they could find. The reports that came back were all the same. Humans celebrated constantly. Birthdays, weddings, graduations, promotions, retirements, holidays, holy days, national days, seasonal changes, successful harvests, sporting victories, artistic achievements, scientific discoveries, and things they'd simply invented because they wanted an excuse to celebrate. "They have a holiday dedicated to a groundhog predicting the weather," one researcher reported in disbelief. "And they celebrate it enthusiastically." "They have parties where they watch explosions in the sky," another added, "just because they think the explosions are pretty." "I attended something called a block party," Kip reported. "They closed down an entire street so neighbors could eat together and play music. There was no official reason. They just wanted to." Processed all of this information with growing amazement. His species celebrated once every 50 years, a somber affair marking the passage of time. Most species in the galaxy had one or two important celebrations per year, carefully planned and traditionally structured. Humans celebrated dozens of times per year, often with no planning at all. They threw surprise parties to shock their friends with joy. They had spontaneous dance parties that erupted without warning. They celebrated things that hadn't even happened yet, gathering to watch sporting events or television shows, turning ordinary activities into communal experiences. But the readings weren't just about frequency. The intensity was what shocked most. At a small wedding in a rural town, joy levels reached 23,000. At a child's birthday party in a modest home, the happiness readings rivaled those of the grand contemplation of the wise ones. At a graduation ceremony for a local high school, parents cried tears of joy that registered higher on the sensors than entire planetary celebrations on other worlds. "I don't understand," admitted to Kip one evening. They were sitting in a coffee shop observing humans interact. "What makes them like this? Why are they so joyful?" Kip had been studying human history for weeks. "I think," she said slowly, "it's because they've suffered so much." She pulled up files on her data pad. Wars that killed millions, plagues that devastated continents, natural disasters, famines, genocides, and countless personal tragedies. Human history was soaked in blood and tears. "Look at this," Kip said, showing him a photograph from something called World War II. Humans in a basement shelter, surrounded by rubble singing songs while bombs fell overhead. They sing when they're terrified. They dance when they're grieving. They celebrate in the face of death itself. Stared at the image. That's not logical. No, Kip agreed. But maybe that's the point. Maybe joy isn't supposed to be logical. Maybe humans learned something the rest of us never had to, that if you wait for a reason to be happy, you might never be happy at all. Looked around the coffee shop. Humans were laughing over their morning beverages. Someone was celebrating getting a new job. Two friends were planning a weekend trip. A woman was showing pictures of her new baby to the barista. Ordinary moments, transformed into joy through nothing but human will. For the first time in his long life, Commissioner understood why someone might smile. Part 2. 3 months into the study, divided his research team into specialized groups. Each group would embed themselves in different human cultures to understand the full scope of human celebration. He wanted data, detailed observations, and most importantly, he wanted to experience these festivals firsthand. The readings meant nothing if they couldn't understand the mechanism behind them. Kip volunteered to study Indian festivals and found herself in Mumbai during Diwali. She'd read about the Festival of Lights, studied the religious significance, and memorized the traditional practices. Nothing prepared her for the reality. The city transformed into something magical. Millions of small oil lamps lined every surface, their flames flickering in the evening air. Fireworks painted the sky in brilliant colors. The smell of sweets filled the streets. Families dressed in their finest clothes, decorating their homes with intricate patterns made from colored powder. But what struck Kip most was how the humans treated her. Within an hour of arriving in the neighborhood, 3 different families had invited her to share their celebration. They gave her traditional clothing to wear, placed a bindi on her forehead, and loaded her arms with sweets and gifts. "You came so far to visit us," one grandmother said through a translator. "You are our guest. Today you are family." Kip tried to explain that she was there to observe, to study, to collect data. The grandmother smiled and put more sweets in her hands. That night, Kip sat on a rooftop with a family she'd met 6 hours earlier, watching fireworks explode overhead. Children danced around her, excited to have an alien at their celebration. The father explained the meaning of Diwali, the triumph of light over darkness, good over evil, knowledge over ignorance. "But mostly," he said, "it's about being together, about remembering that we're not alone in the dark." Kip's scanner showed joy levels at 31,000. But the scanner couldn't measure what she felt in her chest, sitting with strangers who'd welcomed her like family, sharing their light in the darkness. Meanwhile, had assigned himself to study American Thanksgiving. He wanted to understand a holiday that seemed to have no religious purpose, no historical victory to commemorate, just gratitude and food. He arrived at a small house in suburban Ohio on the 4th Thursday in November. The family who'd agreed to host him for the commission's research met him at the door with overwhelming enthusiasm. "Welcome, welcome," the mother said, ushering him inside. "We're so excited to have you. We've never had an alien at Thanksgiving before." The house smelled like roasting turkey and baking pies. 3 generations of humans crowded into a space that seemed too small for all of them. Children ran underfoot. Teenagers argued about football teams. The grandmother presided over the kitchen like a general commanding troops. Set up his scanning equipment in the corner and tried to remain objective. "Oh no," the father said. "You're not hiding in the corner. You're sitting at the table with us." "I'm here to observe," protested. "You can observe from a chair," the grandmother said firmly. "No one stands alone in my house on Thanksgiving." Found himself seated at a long table, crammed between a teenage boy who wanted to know everything about space travel and a little girl who insisted on showing him her drawings. The table was covered with more food than seemed necessary. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, green beans, rolls, and at least 6 different pies. Before eating, the family joined hands. The grandmother asked each person to say what they were thankful for. "I'm thankful for my new job," the father said. "I'm thankful my surgery went well," an aunt added. "I'm thankful for video games," the teenage boy said, earning a laugh from everyone. When they got to, he hesitated. "I'm thankful that you invited me to your home," he said quietly. The grandmother squeezed his hand. "We're thankful you came." The joy readings on his scanner hit 28,000, but more than that, felt something he'd never experienced: belonging. These humans had known him for 2 hours, and they'd made him part of their family. Not because they had to, not because of diplomacy or protocol, but simply because it was Thanksgiving and no one should be alone. Other researchers sent back similar reports from around the world. At a wedding in Kenya, they danced for hours with people they'd never met. At a street festival in Japan, they were taught how to properly wear a yukata and carry a. At Carnival Inn, they were dressed in feathers and sequins and pulled into the parade whether they wanted to be or not. Every report mentioned the same thing. Humans didn't just invite strangers to observe their celebrations. They demanded participation. They insisted on sharing. They pulled everyone into the joy whether it was wanted or not, and somehow it was always wanted. One researcher stationed in Ireland sent a particularly amusing report. He'd been studying Sday in a small pub when the locals discovered he'd never tried. The next 3 hours were apparently spent teaching him Irish drinking songs, the proper way to toast, and the complete history of Ireland's struggles and triumphs. By the end of the night, he reported that he was Irish now, apparently, and proud of it. Compiled all the research and found patterns emerging. Human festivals engaged every sense simultaneously. The music, the food, the decorations, the smells, the physical touch of embracing and dancing. Each element amplified the others, creating a feedback loop of sensory joy that overwhelmed the brain's normal capacity for happiness. But more than that, humans had mastered something unique in the galaxy. They celebrated not just the good things, but also the hard things. They had funerals that turned into celebrations of life. They had holidays marking struggles and survivals. They threw parties when someone lost a job, calling it a starting over celebration. They gathered during natural disasters, singing to keep spirits up. Kip brought him a recording that crystallized everything. She'd interviewed a woman in her 90s who'd survived the siege of Leningrad during World War II. "We had nothing," the woman said in the recording. 125 grams of bread per day. That's about 4 slices. People were dying in the streets. It was winter, 40 below zero, no heat, no light, no hope. "How did you survive?" Kip asked. The old woman smiled. "We sang. My mother, she said that the Nazis could take our city, our food, our warmth, but they couldn't take our songs. So every night we sang. We told jokes. We shared memories of better times. We celebrated being alive for one more day." "You celebrated," Kip's voice on the recording was confused, "during a siege." "Especially during a siege," the woman said. "When everything is dark, you must make your own light. That's what it means to be human." Played that recording 17 times. Each time, he understood a little more. Humans didn't celebrate because life was easy. They celebrated because life was hard. Every party was an act of defiance against death, suffering, and despair. Every gathering was a statement that joy was a choice, not a circumstance. Every festival was humanity looking at the darkness and deciding to light a candle anyway. The other species in the galaxy celebrated achievements and milestones. Humans celebrated existence itself. Called a meeting with his entire research team. They gathered in a conference room with 6 months of data, thousands of reports, and millions of readings. "We came here to measure joy," he said, "but I don't think we can. Not really. The numbers are astronomical. Human festivals generate happiness at levels that exceed every other species we've studied by factors we can't fully calculate, but the numbers don't capture what we've experienced. He looked around the room at his team. 40 researchers from 40 different worlds, and every single one had been changed by their time with humans. They've taught us something, he continued. Joy isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create, it's something you choose, and most importantly, it's something you share. Kip raised her hand. So what do we tell the council? Was quiet for a long moment. Then, for the first time in his life, he smiled. His face wasn't built for it, and it probably looked strange, but he did it anyway. We tell them the truth, he said. We tell them that humans are the most joyful species in the known galaxy, and then we teach the galaxy how to celebrate like humans do. Part 3. The report took 3 weeks to write. He'd never struggled with a document before. Scientific reports were supposed to be objective, clinical, filled with data and devoid of emotion. But how could he write about human joy without emotion? How could he reduce what he'd experienced to mere numbers? In the end, he did both. The report contained all the data, the measurements, the mathematical comparisons. But it also contained stories. The grandmother in Mumbai who'd welcomed Kip, the family in Ohio who'd made him part of their Thanksgiving, the survivor of Leningrad who sang in the darkness. He submitted the report to the Galactic Council and requested an urgent session to present his findings. The request was granted. Representatives from 3,000 species gathered in the council chambers to hear what the Cosmic Happiness Commission had discovered. Stood before them, his team seated behind him for support. He'd given 1,000 presentations in his career. This was the first one that made him nervous. Members of the council, he began. After 8 months of comprehensive study, the Cosmic Happiness Commission has reached a definitive conclusion. Human festivals generate joy at levels that exceed every other known species by a factor of 47. By every measurable metric, humans are the most joyful species in galactic civilization. Silence filled the chamber. Then the objections began. Ambassador OK of the Logical Concordat stood first. Impossible. We've studied human history. They're a violent species, prone to warfare and self-destruction. They've barely achieved space travel. How could such a primitive people be the most joyful? Perhaps because of their history, not despite it, replied. We found that human joy correlates directly with human suffering. The more they've endured, the more intensely they celebrate. That's inefficient, OK argued. Our celebrations are carefully planned, perfectly executed, maximum joy for minimum resource expenditure. Humans are chaotic, wasteful, excessive. Yes, agreed. And their celebrations are 47 times more joyful than yours. The Harmonious Collective's representative spoke next, their voice a chorus of perfectly synchronized tones. We achieve pure happiness through unity and meditation. Our grand contemplation reaches heights of serenity unknown to chaotic species. Surely our quality of joy surpasses their quantity. Pulled up a video. This is a human wedding, 2 people committing to spend their lives together. Watch the readings. The video played on screens throughout the chamber. Humans dancing, laughing, crying tears of joy. The bride's father trying not to weep during his speech. The couple's first dance. The moment when everyone joined them on the dance floor, young and old together, celebrating love. The joy readings climbed to 34,000. Your grand contemplation, said gently, reached 1,203. This is a small wedding in a rural town with maybe 100 guests. The humans do this millions of times per year. More objections came. Some species claimed their celebrations were more meaningful, more traditional, more spiritually pure. Others argued that human joy was shallow, temporary, chemically induced by their primitive brains. Let them speak. Then he showed them more videos. A child's face lighting up on their birthday, strangers hugging at New Year's, A grandmother teaching her granddaughter to make traditional food, soldiers coming home to surprise their families, crowds singing together at concerts, friends gathering for no reason except to be together. The question isn't whether human joy is different, said. It clearly is. The question is why. He displayed the final conclusion of his report. Humans celebrate constantly because they live with the constant awareness of death. They are short compared to many of us. They know their time is limited, so they don't wait for joy. They create it. They demand it. They insist that every day contains something worth celebrating. He paused, letting that sink in. Humans don't just experience happiness, they weaponize it. They turn joy into an infectious force that spreads to everyone around them. We tested this extensively. Human celebrations don't just make humans happy, they make everyone happy. Every species in this room has researchers who went to study humans and came back changed, laughing more, smiling more, celebrating more. A junior ambassador from 442B, a young representative who'd only recently joined the council, raised her hand tentatively. I have a question. Please, said. How do they maintain it? Our species celebrates once every orbital cycle. It's special because it's rare. Humans celebrate all the time. Doesn't the joy diminish? Doesn't it become ordinary? Smiled. We wondered the same thing. So we asked them. The answer is profound. They told us that joy doesn't diminish when you share it. It multiplies. Every celebration makes the next one more meaningful, not less. They build memories on top of memories, traditions on top of traditions, until their entire lives become a festival of moments connected by love and shared experience. He pulled up one final video, an interview with an elderly human man named Robert. Why do you celebrate so much? Kip's voice asked in the video. Robert laughed. Because life is hard, young lady. I've buried friends, I've lost jobs, I've been sick, broke, and broken-hearted. The world can be cruel and unfair and painful. So you know what? I'm going to throw a party. I'm going to gather the people I love, make some food, play some music, and remind myself and everyone around me that despite everything, we're alive. We're together, and that's worth celebrating. Even when things are bad, Kip asked. Especially when things are bad, Robert said. When everything is falling apart, that's when you need joy the most. That's when you need to look at the darkness and say, not today. Today, I choose happiness. Today, I choose celebration. Today, I choose life. The council chambers were completely silent. Spoke into that silence. Humans celebrate because they've learned something the rest of us never had to. Joy isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. It's not a reward for a life well lived. It's the reason to live at all. He took a breath. The Cosmic Happiness Commission officially recommends that human festivals be declared the most joyous events known to galactic civilization. Furthermore, we recommend that other species study and adopt human celebration practices, not to replace their own traditions, but to enhance them. To learn what humans have mastered, that joy is not a finite resource to be rationed, but an infinite force that grows stronger when shared. Ambassador OK stood again. This is highly irregular. You're asking us to learn from a species that's barely left their own solar system. Yes, said, because they've mastered something we haven't. We've conquered space travel, achieved peace, built civilizations that span galaxies, but we forgot how to be joyful. We forgot how to celebrate. We forgot that happiness is the point. The vote was called. Watched the display as votes came in from 3,000 species across the galaxy. It took an hour. When the final tally appeared, his chest tightened with an emotion he was still learning to recognize. Unanimous, 3,000 species unanimous. Human festivals were officially declared the most joyous events in known galactic civilization. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light. Within days, humans were being invited to other worlds to teach celebration. Within weeks, species that hadn't thrown a party in centuries were attempting their first birthday celebrations. Within months, the galaxy was fundamentally changed. The Stoic hosted their first birthday party and discovered that aging wasn't just something to endure but something to celebrate. The Harmonious Collective added dancing to their meditations and found that movement enhanced their connection. The Aquatics started inviting other species to their spawning grounds, transforming a biological imperative into a cross-species festival. Kip reported that her home world had declared a new holiday, First Contact Day, celebrating the day they joined the galactic community. They'd asked humans to help them plan it. It involved fireworks, food, music, and compulsory hugging. "It's chaos," Kip told with a huge smile. "It's loud and messy and completely unnecessary." And asked, "And I've never been happier in my life." A year after the declaration, the humans did something very human. They invited the entire galaxy to Earth for what they called the Intergalactic Festival of Festivals. Every species was asked to bring their own traditions, their own food, their own music, and share it with everyone else. Attended as the guest of honor, he walked through celebrations he'd studied and dozens he'd never seen. He ate food from 1,000 worlds. He danced to music that shouldn't work together but somehow did. He watched species that had never spoken to each other sharing drinks and laughter. At midnight, the humans set off fireworks visible from orbit. Every species on Earth and in the ships above stopped to watch light paint the sky in colors that description. In that moment, the joy readings reached numbers that broke even the newly calibrated sensors. Stood between Kip and Robert, the old man from the interview. On his other side was Ambassador OK, who'd argued so fiercely against the declaration and now wore a ridiculous party hat and couldn't stop smiling. "You changed the galaxy," Robert said too. "No," replied. "I just told them what you've always known. That joy is a choice. That celebration is an act of courage. That happiness is something you create and share." "And now," Kip asked, "what happens now?" Looked around at the impossible gathering. 3,000 species celebrating together, sharing joy across every difference and division. Humans had done this, not with weapons or technology or superior intellect, with parties, with music and food and the radical insistence that everyone deserved happiness. "Now," said, "the universe learns to celebrate, and maybe, just maybe, we finally understand what it means to be truly alive." The fireworks continued overhead, and the galaxy danced below them. And for the first time in his very long life, Commissioner of the Empire was completely, absolutely, perfectly happy. And he knew exactly why.